Welcome to Testify. Today we take a walk through the book of Philemon. Please join us. Let us begin. The Apostle Paul was the author of the book of Philemon. He was successful as an apostle to the Gentiles, who saw many converts among both residents of Ephesus and visitors to the city. The book of Philemon takes place in Ephesus. One of the visitors converted under Paul's teaching was a man named Philemon, a slave owner from the nearby city of Colossae. In the Bible book that bears Philemon's name, Paul addressed Philemon, with a title given to those who served for a time alongside Paul. The story begins like this. A slave named Onesimus had escaped from his owner, Philemon, and had run away from Colossae to Rome, in the hope that he could disappear into that urban environment. Once in Rome, Onesimus, either by accident or by his own accord, came in contact with Paul, who quickly led the runaway slave to faith in Jesus Christ. Paul had already been planning to send a letter to the Colossian church by AD 60 or 61 from a prison cell in Rome, as he was imprisoned for preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul wrote a personal letter to Philemon, and sent Onesimus the slave back to Colossae. Paul's message to Philemon was a simple one. It was based on the work of love and forgiveness that had been placed in Philemon's heart by God. The apostle's message would have had extra force behind it because he knew Philemon personally. Paul had explained the gospel to Philemon, and had witnessed the profound result, new life blossoming in a once dead heart. Paul knew that conversion is nothing to trifle with, but that it should be honored and fostered. In other words, Philemon had accepted the gospel previously, but this was a way to foster it by forgiving Onesimus. So Paul made a request. He wanted Philemon to forgive Onesimus, to accept the slave as a brother in Christ, and to consider sending Onesimus back to Paul, as the apostle found him useful in God's service. Paul did not minimize Onesimus's sin. This was not some kind of cheap grace that Paul asked Philemon to offer. No, there was sacrifice required in this request, and because of that, Paul approached the topic with gentleness and care. His letter to Philemon presents in full color the beautiful and majestic transition, from slavery to kinship, that comes as a result of Christian love and forgiveness. In his letter to Philemon, Paul respectfully pleaded for Philemon to receive his runaway slave, Onesimus, back as a brother in Christ. Paul asked Philemon to forgive Onesimus and consider him a valued member of their shared Christian community, not just a former slave. He even offered to cover any financial losses Onesimus might have caused. How does this apply to us? If you live long enough, and you will understand the difficulty of offering forgiveness when you have been wronged. It does not come easy, yet as believers, we have to recognize that our ability and willingness to offer it are the result of Christ's saving work on the cross. Because of that fact, forgiveness serves as a determining factor in who we say we are and how we hope to live our lives. When we do not forgive, bitterness takes root in our hearts and chokes the vitality out of us. Allow Paul's letter to Philemon to encourage forgiveness in your own life, and trust God to foster renewed life in your heart and your relationships. Take care. Stay blessed.